Welcome back everyone. Still talking about economic indicators. We are done with the GDP and economic growth, and now we are ready to talk about different type of indicators: unemployment and price level or inflation. So what we are up to today, we're going to talk about explaining how we date the business cycle. We know from our previous lectures that dating business cycle is related to economic GDP. We know from our previous lecture that dating business cycle is related to economic growth, but actually it's not the only indicator. One of the indicators that we use to actually date the business cycle is the unemployment rate, which we will be introduced to in today's lecture. We will explain how do we measure the unemployment rate. We will know how we measure inflation using the CPI or the Consumer Price Index. So let's start by talking in our first unit about the business cycle and its dating. So business cycle actually is ups and downs in the economic activity. It's irregular, so there is no equal intervals or time intervals for the business cycle. It's a movement in the production, in the economy, and the creation of the jobs, and thus unemployment. So the National Bureau of Economic Research is one of the organizations that actually date the business cycle and define the recession, expansion, peak, and troughs. It actually defines the cycle as following. A recession is a significant decline in activity spread across the economy lasting for more than few months. So here when we're talking about recession, we're talking that economic activity is going down. Companies are not growing as usual, or maybe some of the companies are closing their doors. Meanwhile, there is a decline in the industrial production. Employment and jobs created are going down. Real income of the people. What do we mean by real income? Real income actually is different than the nominal income. Real income is actually the income of the people adjusted to the change in the prices. So if your income increased by 10% and the prices went up by 20%, this actually means that your income didn't increase. It actually decreased in real terms, and this is one of the indicators that we date business cycle using it. A wholesale retail trade, a recession actually starts after a peak, and the economy will go down until we reach the trough before we go up again into a new expansion. This is the business cycle definition by the NBER. So as you can see from the definition, employment and unemployment is one of the signals for the business cycle. Before we go to understand how do we calculate unemployment, let's take a look on the history of the economic business cycle, before we start talking about unemployment, let's go for talking about the business cycle in the States. This graph is showing us the business cycle in the States between year 1921 and year 2001. As you can see, ups and downs in the economy. On the y-axis we have percentage change in the real GDP, which is the economic growth. On the x we have the timeline. As you can see, economy is going up and down. There are some points that we can talk about. Firstly, we can talk about the Great Depression that happened in 1929. It's a great decline in the economic activity, the biggest one in the 20th century, before the American economy goes up again during World War II, as the States were the main provider of the goods and services for the fighting countries. There is another point that actually may attract your attention, what we call it the OPEC recession, which happens because of 1973 war, October War, and due to the embargo that was levied by the Islamic countries If we take a look over this graph that shows the economic cycle in the States between year 1921 and 2001, we can find different ups and downs. We can see a great decline in 1929, which is the Great Depression, a big expansion that happens in World War II, another recession that is labeled OPEC recession, that is due to October 1973 petrol embargo that was divided by Islamic countries. What we can figure from this, that the economy goes in ups and downs. This is the business cycle. One of the variables that we use to date this business cycle, calling this point recession or expansion, is the employment and unemployment rate. So let us understand what do we mean by unemployment. Looking forward to see you in the next unit.